Darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I didn't think I'd see you this postseason, but I'm back. I'm back in the pits of hell, and the Sixers have put me there yet again. And we're going to talk about it right here. 2 hours, no traffic. Philly Brandon, Spen Harris. Spen, what's going on?
A little bit of a cold open, but given the circumstances, I'll allow it. I definitely respect it. And yeah, listen, now, we don't have this weird power struggle where one of our teams are in the playoffs and the other person is sulking about the offseason. Now we're pretty much both sulking, Philly Brandon.
Yeah, I've been in full sulk mode since they blew Game 6, but especially when they ruined Mother's Day and just laid an absolute egg in Game 7 in Boston. And we'll get into that at length. I have some things to say for sure, but I know from an outside perspective, what was it like watching that? Look, like if you're looking at the rest of the East, did you watch that game and go, "Oh, Sixers not for real"? Because I did.
Yeah, I mean, both games 6 and 7, they were begging. The Sixers had every opportunity to grab the bull by the horns and take control of that series. In game 6, nobody could score in that fourth quarter. And Jason Tatum was like, you know what? I haven't scored all game. Let me see if I can hit a few threes. And it was literally like he was almost like training in his backyard. Like it was wild how in this really high pressure situation, 9 guys on the court, 5 of them who play for the Philadelphia 76ers chose not to stand up and fight. And Jason Tatum's like, yeah, this is shooting practice for me. Sidestep 3, step back 3.
Yeah.
So that was game 6. And then game 7, that third quarter, I felt that same sort of like the game was close after the first half. Who's going to take control? And Tatum obviously stepped up offensively, but you guys had no sort of punch back to the Celtics after the game 6 loss, especially on offense. I mean, you guys made Al Horford look like goddamn Ben Wallace on defense. It was insane.
Yeah.
So yeah, my thought process was that game, that series had every opportunity for Philadelphia to take control, and you just shit the bed.
Yeah, I mean, PJ Tucker had that great meeting with Joel Embiid when he was like, "Look, dude, all kinds of respect to Al Horford, but you can't. This guy's dominating you right now, and we just can't have that in the playoffs." And I don't know if it got lost in translation or if Joel didn't hear him or what, but all he did for the rest of the series was just kind of, just lay down and take it. I mean, Al Horford, I think he's listed at 6'10". I've heard he might be closer to 6'9". Like, he's 36. Joel's 7 foot, 280. With some of the best footwork in the league, he shouldn't be getting big time by Al Horford of all people. James Harden, we'll get into him, laid an absolute egg, 9 points, 5 of them at the line, countless turnovers and bad moments. It's just, Boston did all the things that winning teams do, and the Sixers did all the things that losers do. And, they're just a loser franchise.
We'll get to Jimmy Harden later. I want to focus on Joel Embiid because, this was one of the – and I don't want to say that he was hurt this playoffs. I mean, yeah, he hurt his knee a little bit in that first round against the Nets. But I think for all intents and purposes, he was pretty healthy, right, Brandon?
I mean, yeah, so it's tricky. He was playing through a strained LCL. A severe strain is a grade 1 LCL strain. So it's supposed to be a 4 to 6 week recovery period. However, he said he was good to go. He took the brace off. Joel Embiid looked at his current status and said, "I'm good, I'm fine, I'm enough." So I'm still holding him to the same standard I would if that injury report doesn't come out, because he told me to. I mean, if he said, "Look, guys, I'm playing banged up, I can help on defense," you go in with expectations. If he tells you, "No, I'm good, I'm fine," well, then I need you to be Joel Embiid from January and February. Like, I need 30 and 10. I don't need, 20 and 8 boards. Like, the blocks were great, but I mean, he wasn't the same guy. Anybody who watched that series, he wasn't the same guy.
So that I'm glad you said that. That brings me to my next question, because he's starting to develop a reputation for a regular season performer as opposed to someone that you can rely on in the postseason. So given the history that you've had watching him in the postseason, is this narrative accurate?
No, I'm still very angry with Joel Embiid, and this year that was absolutely the case. I think he got the MVP and took his foot off the gas, which is really shameful in my opinion. But I mean, I objectively can't say that. I mean, last year he was playing with the he had a torn something in his knee that he played through, which he absolutely shouldn't have been able to play through. The year before that he played with the broken face and he played well. So Joel's played really well in playoff series and been severely injured at that. So one year doesn't undo that. This year for sure, that is the case. He was a regular season guy and he took his foot off the gas in the postseason. But I don't think it's enough to label his career that way, because it really hasn't been the case until 2023.
All right, so I buy that. I get what you're saying. You watch a lot more Sixers playoff basketball than I do. There's an article that came out from onfiredigital.com. I'm sure that, this information is in other articles, but I'm seeing it here. And the headline reads, Daryl Morey says Philadelphia 76ers want Joel Embiid to get more playoff-like reps. So I saw that and I was like, that's a weird tagline. Let me read the article. And I'll paraphrase, but basically Daryl Morey had a long conversation with Joel Embiid about his regression in the playoffs, specifically the second round. Morey says the conversation was sparked by Embiid and that he is taking it very seriously and getting regular playoff-like reps is a priority. What in the fuck does that mean? How can you get playoff-like reps not in the playoffs? What are you going to do? Change the guy's calendar? Tell him that it's May in January? I was so blown away by this article. I don't understand what the mindset is. Hey, Joel, you played a really shitty series. We got to work on your playoff basketball mentality. All right, let's just get some playoff reps in there. Like, what am I reading?
Yeah, I don't really know. I watched the Daryl Morey press conference and was thoroughly underwhelmed. He's a strange guy. Like, he answered, I'll give him credit. He sat there and he took every single question. He didn't, all right, guys, it's enough. All right, guys, I'm going to leave. He sat there and took it. But he answered every question as if he just learned what basketball was. And it was very odd. That was one of the quotes where it's playoff-like reps. I mean, look, for all the things that Joel is, Young really isn't one of them anymore. He's 29. This is his fifth playoffs. So he's been there, done that. He doesn't need more reps. He's not surprised by what the playoffs are. And the Sixers, for what it's worth, were a contender for the 1 seed all season. So he played in meaningful games from beginning to end of the season. So I don't really know what that means. I think it's a very cheap excuse that he can't really use. But that whole press conference in general was odd, from the fact that, Morey said, that, he approached ownership and asked for Doc to be dismissed, which I thought could have been worded differently, to the fact that, Joel Embiid was angry about Doc getting dismissed, but he wasn't consulted. And then at the very same press conference, he said, players aren't consulted in coaching decisions. But look, James Harden, it was no secret, didn't like the way Doc used him as a stereotypical point guard, even though that's all he is at this age. Boom, Doc's fired. Then a day later, Mike D'Antoni, who hasn't coached in the league at a head coach level in 2 seasons, he's now supposedly the front runner for the job. I mean, look, D'Antoni's boys with Harden, he's boys with Morey. He's not here because of any kind of metrics or any kind of resume. I mean, he's like Doc. He's a career coach with a lot of wins and almost no titles.
Yeah, I think it's been more than 2 seasons. I think he last coached the Rockets, right? Like 4 or 5 years ago, I think.
No, he was on our bench for a little while.
As an assistant?
Yeah.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, look, I think that we got to take a step back and look at Daryl Morey's resume and say, how great was he in Houston or how great was James Harden in Houston? Like, did Daryl Morey make James Harden who he was in Houston, or was it the other way around? Was just James Harden one of the most brilliant basketball players? And as long as Morey put 3-point shooters around him, like we talked about this off air, I don't think you have to be an expert GM to get guys like PJ Tucker and Trevor Ariza and Robert Covington and Gerald Green and just surround them with James Harden and Chris Paul. Like, yeah, you're going to go to a Western Conference Finals. Like, you can't look at that roster and tell me Morey was a genius. They lost to the Warriors every single time. When the going got tough, Harden crumbled and they were done. So it hasn't surprised me that Morey sort of failed as the Sixers GM this far. And I look at success for you guys as winning a championship, right? You've been at the doorstep for the last 4 or 5 years. You're one of the best teams in the East. Think about the top 3 teams, Brandon. Boston, finals last year. Milwaukee, finals champion 2 years ago. 76ers. Haven't gotten past the second round. So, yeah, I look at Daryl Morey. He did all this stuff to get James Harden here. James Harden comes here. It's not working out the way you guys had envisioned it. And now you sort of blame Doc Rivers, who, isn't the best coach in the world, but kind of a scapegoat in this scenario. I don't know. I don't know how you can bring this team back, make a few adjustments, and expect to compete again just because you got a new head coach. Doesn't make sense to me.
That's the scary part for a lot of Sixers fans is that since Joel, so let's say the last 4 seasons, because Joel and Ben's first playoff appearance, we were just happy to be there. So let's say the last 4 seasons has been we have the core for a title, we need the role guys, and that's true. I mean, for about 2 or 3 years, the Sixers did have an awful bench, and Elton Brand's roster construction was horrible at best. I mean, Josh Richardson comes to mind, Al Horford comes to mind. There's other names that I'm missing that were just horrible decisions, and we could always blame it on we need role guys. A couple role guys were going to be all right. This is the first year in the Joel Embiid era where you had the role guys. I mean, Melton is one of the best bench players, I would say, in the East. He can clamp up your best player. He can shoot the 3. He can run the point. George Niang shot 41% from deep. McDaniels gave you minutes. Paul Reed gave you. You had the depth for the first time, and now you look at the issue, and it's maybe our core's the issue, and that's so much harder to fix. You can fix depth through the vet minimum. You can fix depth through young, high upside guys like Anthony Melton, but when you got to fix your core, that is significant roster construction, and we have no money to do it. Whether or not James stays or leaves. Even if he leaves, I think we're only looking at around $8 million in free cap space, which is not enough to go get a difference maker. So, for the first time in the Joel Embiid era, the Sixers are looking around like we may have exhausted all of our options, and we're still a second-round team. And the team that ushered in the process was that Sixers team that took the Celtics to 7 before they went on to win the title. So we're right back where we started 10 years later.
Brandon, I guess we'll start here, but where do the 76ers go this offseason? What do you think they do? Do you think James Harden comes back?
Yeah. Coaching-wise, my dream hire is Nick Nurse. The Sixers haven't had a really great coach at making adjustments. I love Brett Brown. I thought he was a great coach for what we needed at the time. I thought Doc Rivers was the natural next choice to take you from, a developmental coach in Brett Brown, who is, I still think is a very good basketball coach. He gets overlooked. Doc was supposed to take us to the championship. He didn't do it. I don't think you go backwards to another guy who hasn't made or won one. So I don't think you go Sam Cassell. As much as I love him as an assistant, I don't go Frank Vogel. I would love to see Nick Nurse. Nick Nurse took a team in Toronto that's very similar to what you have now in Philly. It's top heavy. I would say Kawhi and Joel Embiid, as far as star power goes, are in the same stratosphere. And the version of Kyle Lowry he was getting was in the same vicinity as the Tyrese Maxey you have now. I'm discounting Harden. I'd like to see him go. If Nick Nurse can win a championship with that Toronto team, I think he can get a lot out of the Sixers team. So he would be my dream head coach. If not him, probably Monty Williams from Phoenix.
Yeah, those are 2 strong options. What about Budenholzer?
I don't mind Coach Bud, but until he won that title in Milwaukee, which was big, he had the same reputation as Doc, where he wasn't a big game coach. Now he did win one, which helps, but so did Doc. So I want a guy who's known for getting more out of less than a guy who's been accused of getting less out of more.
Okay, so you want Nick Nurse, you want Monty Williams. Obviously, Doc's gone. Did you hear, who was it? Oh, Rasheed Wallace's comments about Doc Rivers?
Yeah, I did. And look, I don't think he's wrong. I've been on this podcast and said, Doc isn't the perfect coach for this team. I just don't think he should be the only one to fall on his sword after that playoff debacle. Like, I don't think Embiid gets to next year his way out of it. I don't think Harden gets to deflect it. I think, one of those two it's going to be Harden. I would love to see Harden go anywhere but Philadelphia. I don't want to sign him to a 4-year max deal, which is what he's demanding and what Morey said is priority number one this offseason, which scares me to death. But yeah, I don't want to see him back, and I definitely want to see D'Antoni hired. And the reason for that is, Joel's not from here. You and I grew up on basketball culture. You know kind of how these power struggles move. Joel's foreign to that. This has always been his team. But if D'Antoni comes in, this is officially 34-year-old James Harden's team who's been in the city for a year and a half. And I think that is a death sentence for the Sixers.
I think right now it's James Harden's team.
You could argue that now.
I say that because his best friend's your general manager. Who does Daryl Morey care about? Pleasing the city of Philadelphia or making James Harden happy? It's a tough question. Yeah.
It's James Harden.
Yeah, I think it is too.
That's illustrated by the fact that he said in the press conference, Joel Embiid was vocally angry about Doc being fired, and they do it anyway. Whereas, everybody was cool with Doc. Like the players all liked him, Embiid liked him. James Harden said, relationship's okay. Gone. See ya. That's too much power for a guy who might be a pit stop in town.
Is there any chance that Daryl Morey tries to trade Joel Embiid in the offseason?
No. For more than just basketball, too. The Sixers are looking to build a brand new stadium in Chinatown in Philly. And typically, you don't build a brand new stadium if you don't think you're going to fill the seats. And without Joel Embiid, the fact of the matter is you just don't fill the seats. So they're not going to rebuild. They're too invested in this new stadium to rebuild. I don't know where they go from here. I don't think James Harden's the answer. I think Dame Lillard's the answer, but I don't know how we get him without giving up Tyrese Maxey. And the organization's been clear that's not on the table. I really like Maxey here, so I'm fine with it not being on the table. I just don't.
I think Maxey was the only guy that proved in the playoffs that he's got stones. Like he made, that game, what was it? Game 4 steal against Malcolm Brogdon when he hit the layup. He had some big shots in that series. He had some big shots in the Nets series. I thought in a weird way, he probably was your most consistent player throughout the playoffs.
He was. And if you go back, not that I expected to, neither, I probably won't even do it. But if you go back to the beginning of the fourth quarter, game 5 in Boston, we're up by, at one point we were up by like 16 to 18 points. Boston makes a mini run to where I think they're down 9. Maxey comes down the floor, hits back-to-back threes to kind of just shut that comeback attempt down, which were huge. I mean, look at the rest of the series. You could have lost game 5 if Maxey doesn't kind of put them to bed. So he's the only guy who proved to have that killer instinct. He was honestly our veteran leadership. They had some, the press conferences were great. Like, look, it's going to be a war. I want these guys with me. Like, he said all the right things. He led on the floor. He was the only one, I think, who really, kind of came to work in game 6 and 7. So I don't think they let go of him. You texted me an interesting trade that I haven't. I forgot off the top of my head, so I want to look at it. But,
take a look. While you're looking, any guard that ever comes out of Kentucky is a monster. Just remember that. Like, you go back to Derrick Rose, John Wall, Jamal Murray, who's still in the playoffs, Rajon Rondo's a Kentucky guy. Just the list goes on and on.
Kentucky?
Monk's Kentucky, Devin Booker's Kentucky, the Harrison brothers, although they're not in the league anymore. Any guard that comes out of Kentucky is just an animal. And the Nets never draft Kentucky guys, ever. Don't know why. Don't get it. They're always studs. So yeah, shout out to Tyrese Maxey. He went to Kentucky. That's a Calipari coach university. Not a fan of Calipari's, but Kentucky just breeds ridiculous guards.
They do. They're crazy. So here's the Spence trade machine that you sent me earlier. I don't think this happens, and I think we talked a little bit about it, but you were saying you would like to see Mikal Bridges to Philly, Harden to Houston, and then in that 3-team deal, you would get back Sengun and the picks from Houston. Which, look, everybody in Philadelphia would throw a parade for Daryl Morey if he pulls that trade off. But there's realistically no way Harden agrees to do a sign and trade.
Yeah, that was more just look, and I didn't want to get into the Nets yet. I want you to be able to talk about your 76ers. I'll get into my opinions on Brooklyn and what I think they should do, but that's just a matter of me wanting my team to go extremely young. I know Sengun's going to be a star. He's a guy you can build around if you get the right young pieces. And Mikal Bridges is someone who should play for a win-now team. He's in the prime of his career. He's proven that he can do it as a primary scorer. So obviously he can do it as a secondary scorer if you needed him to do that. He'd be the perfect fit in Philly. I mean, he'd be such a good fit with Embiid from a basketball perspective. And that's coming from a Nets fan. And then, yeah, Harden wants to go to Houston. Those are all the reports, right? He wants to go back to Houston. He wants to play there. He loves the people, the environment, the culture out there. He basically became a god in Houston. So I don't know. It's a trade that kind of makes sense for all sides, but I don't, and the other part of this is I don't think Sean Marks is getting rid of Mikal Bridges. I think he wants to keep him and build around him. Yeah. He wants to sell tickets, and you're not going to sell tickets with a young up-and-coming team in Brooklyn, a city that already struggles because they compete with Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, I mean, based on the reports, you would think Harden to Houston. What got kind of tricky was when he said that piece, and I think you sent it to me too, where he wants to play for a competitive roster and basketball freedom to be himself, which to me is a direct shot at Doc Rivers and the Philadelphia 76ers for forcing him, to be a playmaker rather than a scorer. So,
but I think that's bullshit, by the way. The whole that he couldn't score, he had the green light to shoot. He just didn't make shots. Or he didn't take shots. He played passive basketball. So, again, we're talking about ridiculous headlines. The fact that he wants more quote-unquote basketball freedom. Bro, you ran the offense. You're able to go to whatever option you want. You ran the two-man game with Joel Embiid all year. That should be every guard's wet dream. What are we talking about here?
Yeah, and Embiid's on record several times saying, I need James to be aggressive. I need James to push the envelope. I need. And Harden was more comfortable taking a step back and facilitating and being able to say in those post-game interviews, look, I'm not asked to score. I'm not asked. No, you absolutely are. But you can say you're not. And you look, the assist numbers are great. Led the league in assists. But if I wanted someone to lead the league in assists, I would have saved myself $30 million and gone and gotten, got Lonzo Ball when he was healthy. Ricky Rubio can lead the league in assists. I'm not giving him a max deal. We gave him a max deal to average 25 plus and lead the league in assists, not just to do one of the two. So I thought that was really, really annoying. And if I'm a Rockets fan reading that, this is the other wrinkle in this thing is James Harden may want to go to the Rockets. We're not sure. If you're the Rockets, does that even make sense for you? I mean, you're so young. You're such a young team. Build that way.
So they just fired their head coach, right? Steven Silas got fired.
Yeah.
All right. So
I think Ime's taking the job, isn't he?
I think so. Yeah, I think Ime Udoka is their next head coach. So you got this, coach who was in the championship 2 years ago. You don't really have an identity right now. Yeah, you have some young studs in Jalen Green and Sengun and Jabari Smith Jr. I think his name is. But if I'm the owner of the Rockets and I want to put people in the stands, no one's going to sell more tickets than James Harden. That, it's more of an attractive entertainment play than it is a basketball play for me.
No, I agree that way. I mean, if you want to fill the seats, then yeah, you go with James Harden. If you want Houston to ever be what it was again, though, I don't think you do go get James Harden. Ironically enough, if you want the Rockets back to the Houston Rockets that Harden created, he's not the guy to do it anymore. I mean, in the short term, yeah, you get a season of maybe sellouts, but you suck again after that, and now you're cash strapped for 4 years. Right now, you have all the money in the world and young talent. Like, why would you handicap yourself to James Harden?
I have no idea. I don't know. But I don't know why a lot of these NBA owners make the decisions that they make.
Me either.
All
Before
right,
we move on to the Sixers,
I want your final words on the Sixers, like eventually, just like your final thoughts on this season. But what do you have for me?
So I can work it into that. So this is if I were Elton Brand, because I'm not Daryl Morey, because Daryl Morey is going to go get James Harden and all of his buddies. If I was anybody else, the way I would conduct this coaching search is, how do you unlock Tobias Harris? What do you do as a coach schematically with Tobias? Because, and I say this because of this, Joel Embiid's probably reached his ceiling as far as how good he's going to be at basketball. He was the MVP of the league this year. He's often injured. He's 29. This is the best Joel Embiid you're going to get right now. You're not going to get more out of him. James Harden, let's just say he comes back. The only thing you can realistically expect from him is the 20-10 guy you got this year. He's also not going to get better. You have a guy in Tobias Harris who, when we brought him in here, was a fringe all-star every year. Should have been an all-star. He played on a bad team, didn't get the looks. Gave him a max deal based on the fact that he can score one-on-one, he can back down bigger wings, he can play the 4 and the 3, and now he can spot up shoot. There's no reason this guy shouldn't be a bigger part of the offense. So that you can't go get a third star. We don't have the money. What are you going to do to turn the guy who's supposed to be our third star into one? And I think if someone comes up with a great answer to how to get Tobias back to averaging 23 to 25 a night, rather than going to buy a star, just rehab the one you already got. I think that's our best course of action. No one will do it. I'm probably out of my mind, but he's already here. We're already paying him. Just get the most out of Tobias. You're muted.
Can I make one comment on that?
Sure.
Tobias Harris over me?
That's another thing. That's the stupid. I love Jimmy Butler. He is one of my favorite basketball players. That video, especially recently, has come up so often and is so dumb because it wasn't Tobias.
I love it so much.
Dude, it was never Tobias over me. No one thought that. The organization didn't think that. They offered Jimmy Butler and Tobias Harris the same max contract. Tobias Harris took it because he wasn't good enough to strong arm anybody else into doing that. Jimmy Butler did not, because he wanted to see Ben Simmons go and Brett Brown go before he put pen to paper. Which, Jimmy, you're a genius. We're sorry. But they were both offered a max deal. He turned it down. That's such a ridiculous argument that keeps coming up on Twitter.
Yeah, and it's crazy because Jimmy Butler's in the Eastern Conference Finals yet again, and you guys can
third time in the last 4 years. 3 for 4.
All right, let's get to the big news from last night. The lottery announcement. The number 1 pick goes to the San Antonio Spurs. So the Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes were won by none other than the organization that employed Tony Parker, that employed Boris Diaw, and that has one of the greatest coaches of all time in Greg Popovich, who is a savant when it comes to unlocking international talent. What do you think of the lottery? Number 2 is the Charlotte Hornets. Number 3 is the Portland Trailblazers. And then 4 is the Houston Rockets.
I think the Spurs got incredibly lucky to get Wembanyama. I think it's the best thing for him. I mean, Greg Popovich will turn that guy into a perennial all-star almost immediately. So I'm happy for him to get great coaching. And basketball is better when the Spurs are good, I think, because Greg Popovich is everything that's great about basketball. So I like when the Spurs are good. I think this is good for the league, good for them. Someone needs to check on the Portland Trailblazers, like mental health, mental capacity, what have you. They got the 3rd pick. They could finally start rebuilding this team. Finally, they have a great pick. This is a really good draft. And they're going to trade the 3rd pick for one other guy who they're going to pair with Dame Lillard to try and compete in the West, when everybody in the West has minimum 3 stars. Some have 3 and some great role players, but no one's got just 2 and a void. So they're going to trade the 3, kick the rebuild down the road, maybe compete for a 7th seed, and just I don't get it, man. Like, what's the thought process out there?
So here's what I'm hoping as a Nets fan, because I think about my team when the lottery happens. Like, sure, were the Nets ever going to get Victor Wembanyama? Absolutely not.
No.
But if the Portland Trailblazers are thinking of trading that number 3 overall pick, and Scoot Henderson falls to number 3, and I know that Mikal Bridges and Damian Lillard have a close relationship, and a lot of people are thinking Dame to Brooklyn. I, along with a lot of Nets Twitter, is thinking maybe we trade Mikal to Portland, get the number 3 pick back, get a few other picks, future picks, and really start to build this thing around a young talent in Scoot Henderson, who, by the way, would be the number 1 overall pick in any other fucking year if it wasn't for the 7'3" freak from France. Is he 7'3", 7'4"? I don't remember how tall he is.
I think he's 7'3". Yeah, you're right. I mean, dude, Scoot Henderson's a baller. Great.
Nasty. So that is what I'm hoping. The dude's 19 years old. He's 6'2". He is going to be the next big thing in basketball outside of Wembanyama. If you're the Brooklyn Nets and you could somehow get him, you already have those picks that you got from Phoenix for the Kevin Durant trade. You have some young pieces in Claxton who are team that needs a center can use. Like, here's my thought process as a Nets fan. Love Mikal Bridges. Love what he did last year. I don't think you can build a championship contender around Mikal Bridges. I just don't. Gut reaction, like gun to head, I don't think it's possible. And getting Damian Lillard here does not make you a top 3 team in the East. You're a fringe top 4, top 5 team in the East. Him and Mikal would be great. Claxton, that trio would be really nice. And obviously you'd want to bring back Cam Johnson in that point. That's a decent starting 4, whoever you'd fill in that, fifth spot. But you're a 5 or a 6 seed if you make those moves. And I don't really care about that as a Nets fan.
Yeah.
I want to get young. I want to blow it up. I want dudes like Sengun, Scoot Henderson. If you want to keep Nick Claxton and continue working and building around him, fine. But I'm at the point where I don't want to be the New York Knicks. I don't want to be the Atlanta Hawks. I don't want to be these fucking fringe playoff teams that pop off once every 2 years, have a nice regular season, and then get booted by a Boston or a Jimmy Butler or a Milwaukee or a Philly. I just don't want to be that team anymore. So I am really rooting for Sean Marks at this point to get the number 3 pick from Portland, to blow up this team for the foreseeable future. So in 3 to 4 years, maybe we could be the Oklahoma City Thunder. If I could be any fan of any team for the next 5 to 6 years,
Thunder.
I would choose to be a Thunder fan.
Yeah. They're I always forget the name of their GM. But man, is he brilliant.
Sam Presti, right?
Yes, dude. Do you know how hard it is for a team like Oklahoma City, and arguably, I mean, maybe outside of Charlotte, one of the smallest markets in basketball? We're always talking about them. Like when they were bad, he got all the picks. We were talking about them. Obviously, they came into the league with a bang with KD, James Harden. I'm blanking. Russell Westbrook. Chris Paul's little resurgence. He had him kind of in the mix. And then now he's got this crew of 5 could-be all-stars on the roster. I mean, it's a masterclass at being a GM. He is what people think Daryl Morey was when it came to Philly. Like, he's the guy. Sam Presti is somebody where, and it's rare that it happens, I would trade for Sam Presti, which I think there's a roundabout way to do it. Maybe you can with coaches. But I would give him whatever he wants. Blank check, ticket to the city. I'll rename Broad Street Sam Presti Ave. I don't care. He is one of the best in the business at building a team. If you can beat Oklahoma City, that would be a testament to Sean Marks, because you got a long way to go to be Oklahoma City. So do I. But they're set up better than anybody in the league, and it's not really close.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. Bob Myers was considered the best general manager, I would think, in the league in the last several years. And there's talk that he might be out in Golden State. He might not want to be the general manager anymore. They have to talk about his contract moving forward. If he were to retire tomorrow, I honestly think Sam Presti might be the best general manager in the NBA.
I would argue he is anyway. Bob Myers built a dynasty in Golden State, which is really hard to do. I mean, he hit big.
It's damn near impossible to do. Look at the amount of turnover we have in the offseason. The coaches for the Bucks and the Suns, one team won the championship, one team was in the championship in the last 2 years. Both of them lost their jobs. Like I don't understand how that happens. And Steve Kerr has talked about it. Doc Rivers, who's been a pretty good coach the last several years, fired. Yeah. It's been insane. So I guess what Bob Myers has accomplished in Golden State is obviously every general manager's dream, but it's damn near impossible in this day and age.
It is, and I think that's why he's going to step down, because I think it falls apart this year. And it's a shame, because as tiring as it was back when it was Warriors Cavs every year in the playoffs, it is kind of fun to have a dynasty around. Like, it's cool to say you lived through it, but like this offseason, I think Draymond all but leaves. I think he goes somewhere where someone's going to give him a bag. I think Klay leaves. I think if they ask Klay to take a pay cut, he's sacrificed enough to stay in Golden State. He's one of the best 3-point shooters the league's ever seen. So I think if they ask him again to be a team player, take a pay cut, because they screwed up and gave Jordan Poole a bag, which isn't Klay Thompson's fault, I think he might leave. So I think that's why you hear rumors of, Bob Myers wouldn't be fired, by the way, step down. Because he's already accomplished everything. It's only going to get worse from here if you're Bob Myers. You've hit the mountaintop. You're on the way down. I think it's why he wants to leave. I would love to see, I don't know how we do it, I'd love to see Draymond in Philly. I'd love to see Klay in Philly, but we can't afford either one of them. They're going to be max contract guys, unfortunately.
Do we want to talk about these current semifinals quickly?
Yeah, we got 4 minutes or so. Yeah,
I do want to talk about Nuggets-Lakers yesterday. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was asked, because he played with LeBron in LA, they won a championship, and now he's playing with Nikola Jokic. And he said the difference between them is LeBron James can jump higher. I thought that was insane. Basically, he's saying like they have the same skill set. Like everything that LeBron does on the court, Jokic does just as well. And in this series,
that's disrespectful.
In this series, in the last series against the Suns, I think we are starting to see, and if they can complete it and win a championship, you are going to start to see Jokic labeled as the best player in the NBA. It was Giannis after they won the championship for a minute. Yeah. He was so dominant against Phoenix that whole next year it was like, oh, Giannis, he's better than KD. He's better than everybody.
Which is never true.
Never true. And Jokic won those MVPs, and we saluted him and we thought he was great, but we weren't putting him above guys like Joel Embiid, really. We weren't putting him up against even a guy like Luka Doncic. I think a lot of people would have over Jokic in the last several years. This year has been different. Obviously, he missed out on the MVP. That was Joel Embiid's. He won that fair and square. But we are seeing one of the most dominant players in the postseason. He's doing everything, Brandon. He's your point guard. He's your center. He's your highest efficient shooter. He's your leading rebounder. He's your leading playmaker. He's blocking Anthony Davis. He just every single possession, he has a positive impact. He's making guys like Bruce Brown and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope 20-point scorers. He is in fucking credible, Brandon. I watched that entire game yesterday. He probably made like 4 mistakes. They were in the fourth quarter, and that actually allowed the Lakers to come back in the game a little bit. But he's really cementing his legacy this postseason. It has been a pleasure to watch Nikola Jokic go to work.
Yeah, he's one of a kind in the way that he's a center, like you're saying, but his court vision is that of like Draymond Green from the paint, like being able to collapse a defense and spray it out efficiently. There's a lot of guys who claim to be a point center, point forward. I think Joel does a little bit too much of it. Jokic is uniquely efficient at doing it. Like you can send the double, and he kind of has the handle to get out of it. He has the smarts to pass out of it. Whereas guys like Joe and Giannis, if you send the double, they dribble so high, they're uncomfortable, they're kind of clunky. He can do those things that they really can't. I will say, I think Jokic, if this postseason goes the way it looks like it's going to go, I think rightfully so, he overtakes Embiid in the center category as the best center in basketball. I'm perfectly okay with saying that. I still don't think if you gave me a franchise to start tomorrow, it doesn't matter how great that center is. It's always going to be guys like Luka. It's always going to be guys like KD, LeBron, who you build around first. And it's not because they're better than Jokic. It's because of the way the league runs. It's so hard to run everything through a center, which is why you and I are so impressed with what Denver's doing. But it's just so much easier to run your offense through an elite wing than an elite center.
I understand what you're saying, and it makes sense because you're a Sixers fan. And I don't mean this to be like condescending, but like your best player is a center. Jokic is not a center. He is a point center. Jamal Murray is their point guard. He does not bring the ball up the court a lot. What him and Jokic do when they play the two-man game, it's usually Jokic initiating it as opposed to Murray having the ball. Jokic is not usually the one setting the screen. He's doing a handoff to Murray and then cutting to the rim. Jokic has Luka Doncic's skill in terms of playmaking. He's got 8 inches on Luka Doncic. He might not be able to hit the three as well as these guys, but he's a pretty efficient three-point shooter when he wants to let it fly. The only times I don't see Nikola Jokic surveying the court and looking around because his eyes are always up is when he's backing someone down and he puts his head down. But the second he goes to make a move, you see his eyes. They look at the three-point line. And if there's someone there, he always passes it to them. And if there's not, he turns around and he hits a ridiculous step-back floater over Anthony Davis. It's pick your poison right now with Jokic. There's no beating him. The only way you have to hope that you get lucky and he makes mistakes. That's the only way you can beat him right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the West series. I think the East kicks off tonight with Miami at Boston, and I think it's going to be a dogfight. I think Miami's going to give Boston a better fight than we did, simply because they have Jimmy Butler. I think Boston steals the first one at home. No, not Boston. I mean, I think Miami steals the first one at Boston. You got to figure they had a little bit more rest. Boston's coming off of an absolute drubbing of the Sixers to where everything right now feels easy. They weren't tested in Game 7. I think they're going to coast a little bit, and Jimmy Butler's starving for a championship. So I think Miami steals one in Boston right off the bat. Boston evens the series, but I think even though we went 7, I think Miami gives them a harder fought series than we ever did.
Score is 42-41 with about 7 minutes left in the second quarter. Miami leads Boston by 1 with Robert Williams at the line. I agree. I'm just not as into this series. I thought that like the Celtics-Sixers series is extremely exciting because you guys were neck and neck most of the year. There were moments where you guys had a better record than them, and then they finished the season better than you guys. I thought that series was extremely exciting. I think that this, LeBron versus Jokic series is awesome. The Tatum-Butler matchup doesn't excite me. It's either like Butler's got to put the heat on his back, and we have to see some Kyle Lowry, Kevin Love heroics, some fucking Gabe Vincent highlights, and some Bam Adebayo dunks. Or like Tatum and Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart just take over and like absolutely make mincemeat of the Miami Heat. And guys like Brogdon and Derek White come in and they have 15 apiece. And now Horford's hitting threes and shit like that. I want to see the Celtics against the Western Conference. Like that's what I want to see at this point. I think the Celtics will probably take this series in 6. I think Butler, like you said, will give them a fight. But the Heat just don't have enough. And what's annoying is if the Heat are somehow able to pull off this upset, the Heat have 0 fucking chance against the Lakers or the Nuggets.
Yeah.
Are we being real? Like, let's be real. Like, Jimmy Butler can be Michael Jordan, but he ain't getting past Denver or LA. The Celtics will give Denver and LA a fight.
Probably, yeah. I don't know. I think you're right. I think Jimmy could average 40, and that'd still not be enough against the West. But I really want to see him try. And it could be because we lost to Boston. I actually quite like Jason Tatum. I think he's a really solid guy. I love Jaylen Brown's game, too. So, I mean, I don't have any personal beef with Boston, believe it or not. But I really want to see – I love watching Jimmy just be a one-man wrecking crew and dragging teams through the playoffs. I know Gabe Vincent had some moments. I know Kyle Lowry had some moments. But when you watch the Heat play in the playoffs, it is Jimmy Butler willing 4 other dudes to a win. I mean, it's get on my back, I will carry you there. And that's kind of fun to watch, whether it works or not. So I'm pulling for Jimmy Butler really hard. I love the way he plays the game. I think, and we got to wrap this up here pretty soon, but I do want to say, a lot of guys do like the tributes that, Kobe would have wanted this, or I do this because Kobe did that. There's no one in the NBA right now who reminds me more of Kobe Bean Bryant than Jimmy Butler. No one else has the same killer instinct that dude does.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair from just the mentality standpoint. I would say
Jason Tatum's game's probably closer.
Yeah. I almost said Julius Randle, but that's just he's a Kobe guy. He doesn't have the same mentality as Jimmy Butler. Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. Butler seems to elevate his play whenever the pressure's on. They're in the playoffs and they're kind of counted out. We'll see. We'll see. It's, if he's able to beat this Boston team by himself, then that's just going to add to his already ridiculous playoff legacy.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. But, we got through a lot. We got through how to rebuild the Sixers, how to rebuild the Nets, East playoffs, West playoffs. I'm sure we'll have football and baseball eventually. But I needed a good basketball episode.
Yeah, we talked lottery, talked Wembanyama, talked Scoot Henderson, talked some coaches. Yeah, this was fun. I enjoyed this, Philly Brandon. But obviously, This is a therapy session for you, so I hope that you feel a little bit better after this, and we can make another appointment for next week.
Yeah, I'll be back in the office, back in one of those comfy 3-quarter chairs. Say next week at 8:30 Eastern.
Sounds good.
Peace. This has been 2 hours, no traffic, brought to you by the fine folks at Nowhere.
Ooh, Nowhere. Yeah, they're a good